Yeah, fabulous. So there's Matt. Nice to see you, Matt. Nice to see you, Paul. Thanks for joining us. We've got Lee as well. Thanks for your kind comment on LinkedIn this morning, Lee. Much appreciated. Okay, let's dive in. We'll let anybody else in as they come. We'll make sure everybody gets the video who's registered, which is fantastic. Morning, everybody. My name's Phil, founder of Life Talk and also the advisor growth community. Life Talk's been going 20 years now, so it's the longest online community for financial advisors. And the advisor growth community is the shortest, the newest online community for financial advisors. Tom and I were talking a little bit earlier about what gets asked, what questions come up in our Life Talk community. And over the 20 years, the single most asked question has always been how do other advisors generate leads? So lead generation marketing comes out top. However, we kind of make a note of pretty well every question that ever gets asked. And whilst there's a lot of technical stuff in Live Talk, we're now seeing a lot of questions around AI, which is a kind of good place to start, really, before we kind of get into it. What I'm seeing with our kind of helicopter view of not just the Life Talk community on Facebook, but on LinkedIn, but the wider financial planning community on LinkedIn as well. I'm seeing some really interesting things. So I'm seeing a lot of overwhelm, which might be something we'll try and tackle, Tom. Overwhelm because there's a lot of discussions around AI because it's a relatively new topic. Not everybody's got kind of best practice just yet. Not everyone's in a position to say, oh yeah, you've got to use this firm or you've got to use that firm. So quite a lot of overwhelm. And as we were saying, there's quite a few AI providers now out there, and everybody's like coming up with new shiny things seemingly every day. So that's exciting. So a certain amount of overwhelm. I'm also seeing a certain amount of underwhelm as well, because for the very same reasons we've been talking about, because AI is still relatively new in the financial planning world. Some people are saying, well, is that it? Is that all it does so far? And I kind of get that as well. I'm seeing a good chunk of advisors saying, do you know, I'm just going to sit tight for a while and let this settle down a bit, see what happens, stay on top of it, perhaps have an AI champion in our business who can be really on the ball, watching what's going on, sign up for all the newsletters, go to all the conferences, and just be aware of where the key things are that we need to be conscious of when it comes to AI. Another thing I'm seeing with advisors is there's a lovely sweet spot, quite small percentage of advisors who are, it's just unbridled excitement. It's like kids in a sweet shop. And I know some advisors are like staying up all night building their own agents now, testing this, pushing this, trying to break things. And that is really exciting. I'm loving seeing that as well. And that kind of says that really is genuine excitement. And there's other advisors again, I can't be bothered with it, and that's fair enough as well. Though, and again, perhaps something we might be able to talk about. Um, Expert in financial advisor mergers and exits and sales are starting to get all over AI as well, because if your business is very AI enabled, then and you can come up with your numbers and your stats and your data at the press of a button, and it's no coincidence that was it yesterday that the FCA's latest data request went out. And I know that firms that are really on top of AI will find that job a lot easier than those that aren't. So being on top of AI is really important, I think, for our future when it comes to exits and so on and so forth. So before we kind of get into it, I just want to go through something I've done in each of our interviews with our AI leaders is the kind of five scenarios that I'm seeing with the onset of AI. Scenario number one, nothing changes. We get very efficient in the back office, which is really good. But we don't really look at AI as something that will seriously empower our clients or move our businesses forward. So nothing wrong with efficiency in the back office, but that is a scenario that nothing really changes. Scenario number two is, and something that we hear about all the time in the news, is that we end up with no more financial advisors. because AI can do it for us. That's a scenario. It's something that people talk about. And just to put some fat on that, this happened quite quietly on Christmas Eve last year. OpenAI announced that you can now add ChatGPT as a contact within WhatsApp. And they sneaked that one out. I thought, that's quite interesting. In fact, in the States, you can even phone up ChatGPT through WhatsApp and have a chat with it. I can't do that in the UK just yet. But I thought this sounds quite interesting. And then the more I thought about it, I realized actually this is seriously profound. When you consider that 79% of the adult UK population use WhatsApp every single day, if it is that easy to get information around personal finance through WhatsApp, then that has quite profound implications for financial advisors. So I thought, well, I'll give this a go. I downloaded ChatGPT onto my WhatsApp and I sent it a little message and I said, hey, ChatGPT, I'm a dentist. I'm 3 years off retirement. I haven't got my financial planning ducks in a row. Gave it some numbers. What should I be doing? Instantly, it sent me back a 3-page report, which was pretty good. So it's that easy for consumers to access personal finance education. Um, and we're also finding now on the plus side of this is that more and more financial planners are receiving new inquiries because ChatGPT has recommended them as a search result. So some interesting things. ChatGPT is the kind of the big one that everybody knows, but it's starting to do more than we really imagined. So no more IFAs is a scenario, probably extremely unlikely. Eric Schmidt, formerly of Google, said, the chances that we'll end up with no more accountants are pretty slim. We probably end up with more accountants doing more complex stuff, but much more efficiently. So that's a scenario. Third scenario, we end up with more financial advisors because AI can make us seriously more efficient. And I was looking at the video on your website, Tom, and all the people being interviewed were talking about the idea, well, what would you do if you got an extra hour a day? I'd talk to more clients, which is good. So potentially more advisors. Fourth scenario, and I think this is actually the really exciting one, is that we can now create completely new business models as financial advisors at scale, at ultra low cost, and really quickly as well. Yes, if we want to, we can go for the so-called advice gap. And to me, this is the really, really exciting thing where we can take the bull by the horns and go, right, now that we've got this, look what else we can do. And the fifth scenario, probably that the role of financial advisors and financial planners actually starts to evolve. And why? Because people are living longer. It is entirely feasible that a financial advisor could have a client for 50 years or more, probably with the same firm for longer than the financial advisor is at the firm. And I know a lot of financial planners don't like being referred to as life coaches, but I think we're going to start seeing financial planners having one foot in the life coaching space and one foot in the financial planning space. And to some extent, that's already happening with lifestyle financial planning. So the long and short of it, lots of exciting stuff happening. Tom, what are your thoughts on all of that?
And quite a lot to unpick in there, Phil, isn't
Yeah.
there? I think those five scenarios are very interesting. I think like ultimately, not to be too flaky of an answer, but I think it's always going to be a combination of some of those things, right? I think the scenario four and scenario five, I think for me and for us at Saturn, very much align with one of where we see the future of the financial advice profession going. Like with artificial intelligence and just kind of better access to data, we're going to see a couple of things happening. One, we are already seeing a big increase in capacity and productivity. So artificial intelligence can help people within businesses kind of move out of the weeds of the day to day. Administrators spend a lot of time doing manual data entry. AI is going to be better than humans at doing that. I type it away with my fat fingers here, like I'm going to make mistakes, right? So how do we make those processes more efficient? How do we give time back to the team to think a little bit more consciously about the way that financial advice is delivered? Because a lot of businesses I speak to are just kind of working at 100% plus and they're just kind of going through the motions a little bit. Whereas, when AI can start to reduce some of that pressure, we can actually start to think a little bit more about the way that advice is delivered. And I think that leads us into your fifth point, which was the kind of evolution of a financial advisor. Like I personally believe that we're going to see the advisor evolve um, into not necessarily more life coaching, but I think kind of more of what I'd say is like a universal advisor,
Hmm.
where the financial advisor has proper control over the rest of the professional services connections that that client has. There's a lot of advisors that I work with, they will have a client that has a solicitor and an accountant, and they might have a legal professional as well. And sometimes it's quite difficult to have oversight across those interactions that client's having. And if you put yourself in the client's shoes, we're having the same conversations quite often with different people in professional services. Like a financial planner will ask me a fact finding conversation, and the legal professional will probably go through the same stuff. But actually, a reimagined role of an advisor could be that you're starting to pull the strings of different professional services. So when your client needs a lawyer, you still have access to the conversation that happened between the lawyer and the client. When your client needs an accountant, a solicitor, you still have oversight over that interaction. And from our perspective, it's always going to be the advisor that should lead on that because they are, the long-term goals, objectives kind of conversation with the client. And the rest of the professional services industry is largely reactionary. So I think the role of an advisor is going to evolve into having better oversight across professional services and kind of start to see this almost democratization of a family office style approach where we can be laser focused on the value that financial advisors are delivering to clients and also at scale. So yeah, I think it's a combination of lots of those different points, Phil. I think the eradication of an advisor is not something we'll see for a long, long time. I think humans believe in human interactions. If you listen to Satya Nadella at Microsoft and how Gina Rametta at IBM talks about AI being the amplification of human creativity, to be a bit pretentious for a second, I think
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
actually a lot of benefit to AI removing the kind of mundane manual work that unfortunately a lot of us in the financial advice industry have to do. And therefore us as humans can think a lot more creatively and build better relationships, which ultimately for me is the role of an advisor, it's relationships.
Yeah, it's interesting you should mention that. I've heard them saying AI is essentially us.
Yeah,
Which, speaking of Microsoft, this book, The Coming Wave, my
great
goodness,
book.
is that a good book? Absolutely fascinating. I love the way it talks about the guardrails and safety and so on and so forth. Really, really extraordinary. So, tell us a bit about you, who you are, where you came from, how you came to be, and why as well you came to create Saturn.
Cool. So my name's Tom, obviously. I joined Saturn as employee number one, I believe. So I can't take credit for founding
Hmm.
the business, unfortunately. But my background is in in financial services. So for the last 8 or 9 years, I've been working in financial planning. So I left university, studied international relations at Sussex, graduated and joined the SJP Academy. So went through my RO exams at the SJP Academy. Unfortunately, that scenario wasn't giving me much access to the advisor kind of day to day because I was shadowing an advisor that spent a long time away. And having left university and being very social there, I wanted to kind of get back into the city. So I was sat studying RO3 at my parents' house, going slightly insane. So I decided to get into London, joined Stellar Asset Management. So we talked a little bit earlier, Phil, about that. And as a business development associate, so I've always been kind of very much focused on kind of people connections and sales and kind of partnerships as my career. I worked there for 6, 7 years or so. I then joined a kind of bespoke DFM kind of startup based down in Bournemouth and Poole. And then was started to become more and more aware of artificial intelligence and its impact in financial planning. I heard a podcast that one of our co-founders, Rohit Vaish, was doing on the Next Gen Planners channel, talking about hyper personalization in financial planning and how large data and AI are going to know us better than we know ourselves, let alone how a planner could really know the clients. And I thought that was a really exciting discussion because I'd just written a blog about the same thing.
Yeah.
So I have a blog on LinkedIn called Navigating the Future of Wealth Management. I was writing about hyper personalization and AI. I shamelessly jumped into Rohit's DMs and was like, "Oh, mate, would love to get your feedback on this blog piece." Got the response saying, "Yeah, I'll check it out." And I thought that might be the end of it. But to his credit, he called me the next day and said, "Look, come in for a chat." And then for the next few months, we were kind of talking about, the industry and kind of where things are going. And I was working with a lot of my financial advice connections and starting to introduce them to Saturn. And then Rohit and Avril, two of the co-founders, turned around and said, "Do you fancy working with us?" Um, which I jumped at the chance at. I'm very, very personally passionate about making financial advice more accessible to more people.
Mhm.
I'm 30 years old. I speak to my mates, down the pub, having a coffee with them about kind of financial advice and financial planning. And I think, unfortunately, we've been let down by the education system and kind of making advice more accessible and kind of understand, so like what financial advice does. Great story is one of my friends was telling me that she'd purchased a house and she'd sold her ISA to do that, but she had 30, 40K sat in a general investment account. Sorry, it was the other way around. She sold money from a general investment account and had a big CGT bill to pay. And I was like, why haven't you used your ISA? And she was like, well, why would I do that? It's got more money in it. And I was like, oh God. Like, so I think there's a lot of these personal stories that,
Yeah.
me being 30, having worked in financial planning and seeing the kind of real power that advice can have, and then seeing how disconnected a lot of my friends are from it. Now, I want to make financial advice more accessible, and I think technology is a way that we can help human-led financial advice bridge that gap. So that's
Yeah.
my kind of personal mission. I think Saturn's an incredible place to kind of drive forward with that.
Yeah, I love this concept that AI is making us more human, and I also love the idea that it knows us better than we do. Even something I'm really enjoying at the moment is using AI to help financial advisors with personal development and business development
Yes.
with some wonderful prompts. Even down to simple stuff like where you go to ChatGPT and you say to it, from what you already know about me, what challenges am I facing or what tricks am I missing? And just explore that and ask it to be deep, personal, and where appropriate, brutal. And the stuff it comes out with is shockingly accurate.
Mm. Yeah, 100%. I use it a lot for that. I use it a lot for my career development, my personal development. Kind of, I was training for the London Marathon earlier this year. Like I use it a lot for kind of training plans and things like that. It's amazing how quickly it can kind of get to know you on an individual level and kind of use a lot of the data, the insights, the kind of way that you talk and phrase things to create very bespoke and very personalized outcomes.
And also, I think something that a number of firms are beginning to discover is how you can use it for coaching advisors, and certainly younger advisors. That's not to say the older advisors get off scot-free. For example, um, we were saying beforehand well, just now, the most asked question in our live talk group by financial advisors is how are each other generating leads? Now,
Mm.
if you ask those same financial advisors, well, how do you generate leads? Most will say, well, referrals from existing clients, which is absolutely fine. But the fact that they keep asking the question suggests we're not quite getting enough referrals and we'd like a few more. And ideally, they should be really good. The trick to getting referrals is for advisors to be able to spot the moments during a meeting when a client is recognizing or is receiving value, those little things where the client's going, yep, oh, I see. Oh, didn't realize that. Or that's a weight off my shoulder. Or wow, things like that, which we kind of just take for granted. Those are the moments when we should be considering asking for referrals. Well, if you found that useful, perhaps you've got some friends or relatives who might also blah, blah, blah. When you record the meeting and transcribe it, and run it through an AI and say to it, tell me all the moments where the client was expressing signs of receiving value, it is incredible with what it comes up with. And so you can use that for role play and helping other advisors as well. Another thing is, tell me all the moments during this meeting when the client was showing signs of potential vulnerability. So real coaching opportunities. So just put you on the spot now. Do you think financial advisors are ready for AI? The reason I ask is when we had COVID, we all sat in front of the TV one evening, and the Prime Minister stood there and said, at whatever time it is tonight or whatever, you've got to stay at home. And literally, in a moment, business owners all around the world had to reset their business and find another way to do what they do. Furlough was clearly an option, but for those that wanted to get, it was a complete reset. And I think we've got one of those reset moments right now with AI here. And I just wonder what your kind of thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think, two parts to my answer. I think, are financial advisors ready for AI? I think in a nutshell, yes. I think they're desperate for it. I think a lot of financial advisors that I speak to and advice businesses, power planners, administrators, business owners are really searching for ways that they can almost create this foundation for growth. Like a lot of the businesses I speak to at the moment are implementing new technologies, reimagining their processes, looking at the people within their business to kind of build this platform for growth. Like everyone's very aware of this cascade of wealth that's coming down between generations. We've got an elderly population. I don't think there's ever been a greater need for financial advice in the country. And I think a lot of businesses are aware of that and trying to think of ways where they can start to expand their capacity to give more advice to more people. And I think everyone in the industry knows that technology and AI are going to be methods or levers that we can pull to kind of get towards our goals. So I think our advisors ready? Yes, for sure. I think the frustration on the advice side, or where I get a lot of questions, is well, what can it do for me, and how do I actually start to implement it? And I think it's that framework for implementation where I think a lot of advisors are struggling right now. And ultimately, most advisors don't really have the time to commit to putting artificial intelligence into their processes and start to think about where in the advice journey AI can have a direct impact. I mean, you've mentioned some examples, Phil, of using AI for coaching and training and kind of putting data in there. But those are all kind of isolated examples of using
Hmm.
AI away from the day-to-day role of a financial advisor, of onboarding clients, of executing on the review process, of issuing suitability reports. All of these are specific use cases that financial advisors and advice businesses in general, not just the advisor, but the kind of real engine room behind them, the power planners and the support staff, need help and support. But I think it's that framework that they're really looking for. So a lot of the work that we do in my team at Saturn, so my actual role at Saturn is head of strategic partnerships. So we very much see our collaboration with firms as a partnership because we need to understand what that business is trying to do, where they're going to be in the next 12 months, or want to be in the next 12 months, 3 years, 5 years. Are they a new business starting out in the industry and therefore they're kind of setting themselves up for growth? Are they kind of in the middle age of that business where they've grown, they're now trying to find some improvements on capacity to grow further? Or are they in the kind of twilight of that business? Are they looking to exit? How does a PE firm look at the implementation of AI from multiples, etc.? Like every business that I speak to is in a different position within their life cycle. So their need for AI is very different. So I see my role as kind of helping them to understand exactly where AI can assist to achieve their goals that they want to. In the same way that a financial advisor would speak to their client and say, like, tell me what retirement looks like. So I think actually creating an understandable framework with key steps in implementation is the right way to think about this. So,
Right.
I think advisors are ready, but I think businesses need a framework to be able to implement it effectively.
So, one of the most common questions I get asked by advisors, and I think somebody on this call actually asked me it as well, is what's the best tool I should be using for XYZ? What's the best tool? That seems to be a common theme. Is that the right question to be asking?
Yes, and the answer is Saturn. I'm joking. Look, I think it is the wrong question. I think the right question is actually coming up with a problem scenario that you have within your business to say, right, we are a financial planning business. We at the moment, and I hear this a lot, we're not taking on new clients because the onboarding process is too painful. It takes me too long to onboard a client. It takes me too long to go through the LOA process. It takes me too long to get the KYC information. I don't have enough time, so we're not taking on new clients. Or we're only taking on clients of a certain caliber, right? Or only certain investable assets or something like that, or someone that can provide enough value from their network. So actually coming to AI providers like Saturn and the various other providers in the market to say, look, I've got this problem in my business right now. How can we work together to fix that problem? Is a much better approach than saying, what can your system do for me? Because I think actually, AI is not this kind of silver bullet that's going to solve everyone's problems. It's a tool and a lever that we can pull to help improve the processes we already have in place. But the problem I tend to see is that those processes are broken in a lot of advice businesses
Right.
because people have had to people have had to create different processes to enable the advice process they want to deliver their clients to be achieved by building these kind of patchwork quilts of tech in the market. We use CRM systems, but we don't like the portals. We go and find another portal system to do that. And then we use cash flow in an external system because we don't like the cash flow that the CRM system does. And we don't like the onboarding process the portal does. We go and find another piece of tech that can help us with the onboarding. And ultimately, what we're doing is creating very fragmented data across various different systems. And ultimately, that for me is the crux of inefficiency in advice. These kind of fragmented data sources that don't
Yeah,
talk to each
yeah.
other. So actually coming to advice AI companies to say, look, this is my problem within my business. How do we work together to solve this? I think is a far better approach. I think it leads to a much better collaborative relationship between the partners that you're working with.
And I think what's quite interesting is that somebody was talking about holy grails the other day, so that finally with AI, we actually have a chance of connecting all these disparate systems together so we can actually talk to it. So tell us about Saturn then. Um, what's the crux of the proposition you have, and tell us everything we need to know.
Cool. So we are building a financial planning operating system that is going to provide workspaces for each people within the team to execute on their objectives as an individual person, right? So our view is that too much time is spent in each role within the advice industry, the advisor, the power planner, the administrator, on doing too much administration. So we want to start using artificial intelligence to empower different workflows across that process. The reason, as I mentioned a second ago, why I think a lot of inefficiency exists is because of the quality of data that exists within the industry. So we started off by working with businesses to improve the quality of their data. We talk a lot about data integrity, and
Mm,
that comes in various different forms. So meeting note transcription is a big discussion point in the industry right now. And if you look at the latest dimensional research they've done into high performing firms, it's a really good research piece. 74% of those top performing firms are using meeting note transcription. It's a system that I think has become fairly commoditized in the industry. And I think it's good. People should be using that. There's various benefits around efficiencies, but also compliance and vulnerability detection. You mentioned that earlier, Phil. So meeting note transcription was where we started when we launched Saturn in 2023 to work with businesses to start improving the quality of their data. That was always going to be a start point for us, but actually the real crux of Saturn's proposition is creating operating models and processes within the wider advice process to execute on things like suitability, data generation, giving better compliance oversight, but ultimately creating an environment where all of these things can be done under one roof.
yeah.
So starting with transcription, starting to look at things like letter generation, compliance automation. These for me are all kind of tactical wins within businesses. But actually the more strategic view is what does the future of data ownership and operating models within businesses look like? And I think that's quite a different mindset to
Mm.
just looking for a transcription tool or just looking for help with review letters.
That's interesting because when I mentioned, we've got a bunch of advisors who are really excited about it. First thing they went for was suitability letters.
Yeah. I think
Um,
it's where a lot of businesses have a lot of pain, right? I mean, takes a long time for people to do that. And
yeah,
if you put yourself in the client shoes right now, like I always will think about, the value that advice is delivering to clients. I think we do that a lot at Saturn because we started in July 2023, right? Like prime consumer duty era. Um, Good piece of legislation, I think, coming in to look at the value of advice being delivered to clients. But ultimately, the outcomes of that, if you look at Nextwealth reports 1 year on, is that more advisors are giving less advice. Three-quarters of advisors are giving less advice post consumer duty. And it's because of the amount of admin we have to do to be able to execute on that advice.
yeah,
If I'm a client right now, I spend, maybe an hour or two with my financial planner doing a kind of really detailed fact find. I might leave that meeting really excited about the future of working with that advisor. But then the advisor has to disappear for 4 to 6 weeks to put together all the documentation and kind of wait for providers to send us information before I can come back and start looking at recommendations. And within that period, maybe some of the excitement's lost. My life has moved on to different things, and sometimes advisors can be frustrated that clients start to maybe lose interest in that. So actually, a lot of the value of financial advice right now is sunken beneath the surface. The client doesn't really see the work that the back office team have to do to put together that recommendation,
yeah.
and that for me is something that I think we should switch. How do we use technology to compress the time it takes to give financial advice, and therefore how do we then heighten the value that clients get out of financial planning?
Interesting you should talk about, say, letters, quite tactical stuff. Just can we explore a bit more what you mean by more strategic and the bigger picture?
Yeah, for sure. So, there's a lot of discussion at the moment around, which CRM system should I use or which portal should I use, which cash flow system should I use? But I think the conversation should be, what do I want my advice process at my firm to look like? What do I want that client experience to look like? And then start to find technology to be able to enable us to deliver that piece of advice. So rather than kind of looking for the best tech provider in different areas, actually, I think businesses should focus exclusively on the process of delivering advice within that company and be very, very focused on their processes. And then find tech providers that understands that and want to build those solutions together. And I think it's a slightly different mindset to just looking
Mm.
for the individual pieces of tech, which is what we tend to see most advisors do at the moment, because that's where I think tech providers have largely operated in financial planning.
That's interesting. That makes a lot of sense. So just as a hotel will focus on the customer experience, or even buying a car, they'll focus on the customer experience. You're kind of advocating that when someone goes to a financial planner, that the financial planner has got a clear thought through experience that they will have. Because at the moment it's quite a clunky route that goes on behind us. There's a lot of running legs and feet going on in the background, which the client probably doesn't see.
Yeah, and I think a really good example of that is letters of authority.
Right.
There's tech providers in the market that are exclusively focused on delivering letters of authority easier. And a good example of that is ReLOA, right? So
Yeah.
great piece of tech, like uses artificial intelligence to extract information from documents and will provide email communications to providers to help with the letter of authority process. From our perspective, that's a great use of the technology, but actually letters of authority is not the full process, right? Actually, the letter of authority is part of an onboarding process for a client. So how do we think about the initial conversation that an advisor would have with that client through to that client actually being a valued member of my community as a business? And there's various different steps as part of that. So there's the initial fact-finding conversation where there's a lot of data that will be identified from a transcription system, which the LOA process needs to be able to refer back to make sure we have the correct information, or if any information is missing. It might be that the provider sent me a document that I then need to go back and challenge, but actually that data might exist somewhere else. And if you don't have systems that have oversight across all of that workflow, then it's very difficult to build up a clear picture of that client's circumstances. And you end up kind of doing things repeatedly or kind of double keying information in various different systems as well. So I think letter of authority is a really good kind of tactical example of where people are looking for tech support, but actually it should be seen as a wider process of how do I want my onboarding at my firm to look? And can systems provide a more joint up approach across the conversation and the LOA process and
Yeah.
then the initial suitability?
Yeah. That's really interesting. So from your helicopter view of how you are seeing advisors using your proposition, can you draw any conclusions, or do you have any observations about the way they're using it at the moment?
Yeah, I think the sentiment and the mood in financial planning has shifted in the last few months. I think a lot of advisors were coming to us because I'm very much led by advisors to say that Tom, I hate writing meeting notes. It's taking up all of my time. Like, can I get some? And Saturn obviously had a reputation for being the best or one of the best kind of transcription systems in the financial planning market. So that kind of helped us start to kind of grow our reputation within the market. I think now the sentiment has shifted away from advisors and more into the kind of operations teams
Yeah.
for operations teams to say, look, don't forget about us. Actually, where can AI start to have an impact within our day to day?
Yeah.
And now a lot of the conversations we're having is around the annual review process, around suitability letters, but probably around more simple advice and suitability, fund switches, top ups, withdrawals, platform switches, where the team are probably 80% of the time that a support team spends is on review letters and more simplified advice.
Right.
And that's where AI can have a real quick impact.
Yeah.
So, we have developed letter generation systems using Saturn's artificial intelligence experience, and also with our recent acquisition of ATEB suitability, combining that with 20, 30 years of compliance and kind of domain knowledge, and the kind of templating skills and network that they've built up in this world to make sure that we can do letter generation consciously, not
Yep.
just quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important part of this is most paraplanners, compliance teams, operations teams that I speak to, when they see let's do suitability letters in 5 minutes, they're quite concerned about that. Like, that might sound great from an advice perspective, but actually I think that's quite concerning from a compliance perspective.
Okay.
So, our duty in the AI world is to ensure that we support teams to do things both efficiently but also compliantly. And I
Yeah.
think we are consciously thinking about the way that that's done. So I think a lot of the conversations we're having now, Phil, is around that kind of concept and less on meaty notes, because I think it's become fairly commoditized in the industry.
Do you think some advisors are being put off by fears of compliance issues coming up through use of AI?
For sure. I recently did an event with Dimensional, and I'll try and get my hands on the research piece so you can circulate it to your
Hmm.
network. But what they were talking about is they asked their community, who's using AI and who's not. Overwhelmingly, the advice businesses were using AI, but for the ones that weren't, their concerns was twofold. One was job security, and the other was data security.
Mhm.
So job security we can talk a lot about, and how artificial intelligence is going to amplify human creativity they mentioned at the start, and kind of actually if you talk to a power planner and ask them what they like doing in their job and what they don't like doing, more often than not the stuff they don't like doing is where AI is going to focus. The
Right.
data gathering and collection piece that they have to do before they could even start to do what a power planner should be doing, which
Yeah.
is the kind of technical resource in the business to understand how a client gets from their current situation towards what their dream retirement looks like, that kind of research and analytics piece.
Yeah.
What they take to us is their creative part of their job, not the kind of logging into CRMs and cash flow systems and risk profiling tools to collect that information together before they can even start to work on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the job security piece is a really interesting conversation. I think AI can start to be positioned at more of an opportunity for people that are kind of threat, and actually look at kind of job satisfaction and how we can enable people to focus on other things. But
Mm.
I digress slightly. I think the other thing that I think is really important is data security. And that for me is the number one reason why advice businesses are not using artificial intelligence right now,
Okay.
because they might see some horror stories around advisors putting very sensitive client information into publicly available models. And things like ChatGPT and Copilot and other systems are going to train on client data. They're going to use that information as any big US data company would. So ensuring that businesses know there are options and solutions out there that are specifically focused on the UK regulated advice industry, have GDPR certification, have SOC 2 certification, adhere to ISO 27001, and all these other kind of data security metrics, I think is the first hurdle to overcome to ensure that the whole business is comfortable using this technology.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Matt's asked a question. Is there anything available through Saturn that allows the client to see where the advice process is at? For example, if there's a seven-step process from initial client contact through to implementation, what step are they at? Just might help manage client expectation and keep client engagement. Good point.
Yeah, it's a great point. I really like that. I think, not at the moment because Saturn is exclusively focused on working within advice businesses, within their internal processes, less on the kind of client facing side of things. We are having various chats with existing portal providers in the market and potentially some stuff that we might look to do in the future as well, of how do we start to involve the client within that process.
Hmm.
Um, there's various different points across onboarding and the kind of ongoing relationship the advisor and the client has where transparency and visibility for the client is going to be really, really helpful. Being able to push back on KYC information as a start for onboarding, being able to send reminders around meetings to make sure they've got all the information they need before you get to the client's house and you don't spend the first half an hour rummaging around the kitchen drawers and that sort of stuff. Like
Sure.
there's
Yeah.
lots of things that I think bringing the client into the process is going to be really helpful on. It's not something that we're doing yet, but it's something that's very much on our roadmap.
Mhm. Where would you say Saturn's real strength lies?
I think our strengths lie in two areas. One is kind of on what we're delivering at the moment, and the second is on the future roadmap of what we're trying to build. And I think what we're delivering at the moment is, if you speak to a lot of the advisors that are using us, and there's 450 advice businesses that are now using Saturn, from big top 10 businesses all the way
Yeah.
down to the one-man bands. A lot of the feedback we get is around the accuracy, the reliability, the kind of usability of the systems that we've built and how easy it is to kind of pick up and adopt. And that's
Yeah.
something we're really proud of. The second around the existing proposition is the community that we're building. To being able to foster spaces and environments where people within our industry can share thoughts, ideas, and collaborate is something we're really proud of and something we're really pushing forward on. So the existing proposition, I think, is excelling on the product side, but also excelling on the wider proposition. Like proposition for me is not just product; it's actually how do we work collaboratively with businesses to ensure they've got support from Saturn, but also across the community. So I think on the existing product, there's meeting notes, letter generation. I think we're excelling, particularly in letter generation from a compliance standpoint with the ATIV acquisition. I think the other benefit of Saturn and where we're getting a lot of success particularly from businesses that are thinking more long term about artificial intelligence and where its
Yeah.
impact can be, is in the transparency of our roadmap on what we're trying to build. We're very open about the future direction of where we think AI can have an impact in various different aspects of financial planning, how we're working now with compliance departments and giving better transparency and access to information and training and competency and things like that. And then what the future of Saturn looks like. For me, a lot of businesses I speak to are saying, look, there's a lot of options out there right now. I'm not quite sure which way to go,
Hmm.
but I don't want to kind of make a decision to go down and back the wrong horse. So I'm just going to wait for a little bit and see what
Yeah, yeah,
happens. I think actually kind of getting on board the horse and kind of riding it with them is maybe a better approach. You don't miss out on some of the efficiencies that are available today. And
yeah.
that's why we will always be very open about what we're building over the longer term.
We'll chat a little about how you mentioned earlier that you've got a couple of exciting stuff, exciting things on the way. Matt's asking, do you have many advice firms who are in a network? Do you have any networks pushing back on their firms using it?
We do, yeah. So we work closely with Benchmark and Sense Network and various other networks, to be honest, Vision as well. Um, each network has a slightly different approach. I mean, some of the networks go down the kind of look, Saturn has been checked from a DD perspective. Advice businesses can kind of make their own mind up, and in no sense do a kind of fairly similar approach to that as well. So we do have a lot of kind of ARs of networks that are just using Saturn in their own right and have got their own kind of goals and objectives as to why they would use Saturn. From a network perspective, though, we're now having kind of more strategic conversations with them about how the networks see benefits of AI. And a lot of it is in that support function. How do networks use artificial intelligence to enhance the compliance support they can give to businesses without creating more friction?
Yeah,
And a lot of the benefits of using things like transcription is the fact that things are recorded. There's really clear documentation on client interactions. There is a standard uniform process on vulnerability detection and the way that we pass that data into support teams. So I think networks are really starting to wake up to the fact that actually implementing AI from a top-down approach, as well as enabling businesses to take a bottom-up approach, is going to be the most effective use of the system.
fabulous. Lee said, can you just give us kind of an overview of what's in the system? He says letters, meeting notes, what else, and maybe give us some hints as to what's to come.
Yeah, for sure. So current things that are available through Saturn, meeting note transcription. So we would call that Saturn's meeting intelligence system because within that capabilities, it does meeting transcription, it does vulnerability detection, but also really importantly, task management. One of the things that we see businesses struggle with is this kind of handover between the advisor into the support team. Advisor finishes the meeting, wants to hand that over to the power planner, to the administrator to enable them to focus on the next client. But more often than not, the standard of the handover is maybe not amazing and you get quite a lot of conversation back and forth. So we will automatically identify action points from a meeting and create tasks, which can then be pushed into existing CRM systems. So we're integrated with Intelligent Office, we're integrated with Xplan, we're integrated with Planner CRM, and there's a number of other CRM systems we're speaking to at the moment. We're also directly integrated into Microsoft for anyone that uses the Microsoft Power Platform. Integrations is a huge focus for us as a business.
Mm.
We want Saturn to be able to be system agnostic, where advice businesses can choose the tech they want to use because it's the way they want to deliver their advice. And
Yeah,
Saturn
yeah,
can seamlessly integrate those systems together
yeah.
rather than systems kind of closing or putting the walls up and saying, actually, if you want to do things, you do everything through us. You can see outside of financial planning with things like HubSpot, how effective that can be when you're on a very integration focused. So meeting intelligence is the first system. We then start to look at letter generation kind of more as a concept. And we have various different features through there, which we'll work with teams on. We have our own letter of authority process. So helping firms prepare for putting together initial recommendations or onboarding clients. We already have, and we've launched an LOA process through Saturn. And then within the letter generation feature, we have annual review letters, which are already available. We do fund switches, top ups, withdrawals, platform switches. So multiple different kind of examples of suitability, which AI can enhance the process. And then within the Saturn group, we have the wider templating abilities to do all sorts of advice, multi-action, complex trusts, estate planning. And I think that is an area where we excel against potentially others in the market, where you could do all types of advice within the same systems. The
Fabulous.
other side to this then, Phil, is compliance. So we've got
Yeah,
a kind of training and competency system, which is already available. And then we're now working on launching our file checking system. So within the next month or so, we'll be announcing quite a lot of stuff around a concept called Saturn Guardians,
Hmm.
which, although a nice marketing name, is kind of a broader product proposition around compliance, where there's file checking, meeting observations, and training and stuff being done through there.
So when an advice firm wants to come on board, uh, how does that happen? Is there training? Is it pretty easy to pick it up yourself? How does all that work?
Yeah, so firms will either reach out to us or we'll be introduced to them by a referral. We very similar to advisors. A lot of our business comes through referrals with industry people talking about us on networking events or us being up on stage talking about things. So we would always start with what we call a discovery call. So having a conversation with firms to understand exactly what they're looking to achieve from this project. Is this
Yeah,
an operational project they're looking at? Is this kind of a quick fix thing that some of the advisors are looking at? Getting that clarity between the firm that we're speaking to into Saturn is a really good way of getting off on the right foot. Um, if they are keen to kind of crack on and start to use some of our functionality, we do free trials of Saturn. So meeting note transcription tool, we always run a 2 week free trial. You can use the system as much as you would like to. We tend to work in phases. So we focus on the meeting note side of things, data capture, as we would call it, implement that as a function through the business, because that data is going to be essential for us to make phase two, which would be letter generation, more effective. We tend to break that down into phases. We do have firms that have done everything all at once, and they've done letter
right.
generation, they've done meeting note transcription, they've done LOAs kind of across various teams. I think the caution I would give to that is kind of change fatigue of doing too much too soon, and the team are a bit like, what is going on? So
Yeah, yeah,
I think
yeah.
trying to phase that down a little bit is where we see the best success of implementing Saturn.
Yeah. You may have seen Paul's question. I mean, he's treading into Holy Grail territory here. How are you managing to get AI to link with current systems? It's hard enough for us to do it. How do you do
Yeah, that's a good question, Paul. We could talk for a long time about
it?
that. I think, we are having different levels of success with different providers in the market that have got different incentives as to how much they want to open up their kind of APIs and their architecture to allow people like us to integrate there. Um, looking at a lot of the kind of existing CRM systems, there's actually a lot of will to do it. You talk to IO and to Planner and to Xplan, and there's a lot of
Yeah,
willingness to be able to integrate in systems. Sometimes there's a tech limiting factor as to how good the integration can be. So an example of that is rate limits within CRM systems. A lot of CRMs will have caps on the amount of data that can be pushed and pulled within a certain time frame across CRMs externally and data being pushed back in. Obviously, we are collecting a lot of client data on the conversations that advisors are having. We've got document upload features where Saturn can extract data from provider statements and things like that you're uploading. So there's a lot of
yeah,
data that we would love to be able to push into CRMs and then ultimately extract back. But sometimes we're capped from a tech perspective on how frequently we can push and pull that data. So, I very much see our role as coming up with solutions for that. Like, how do we build better integrations via APIs? Or, excitingly, there are advances in AI where actually APIs might become less relevant. And there's other ways that we can get data to move effectively between us and existing systems. So
yeah.
I think that's a problem that us on the tech side as providers need to solve to enable advisors to stop having to move data manually across systems.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Lee's raised an interesting one. He said he tried another system recently and there were a number of errors in the meeting notes and it didn't recognize who the speakers were. Cards on the table. Have you got any weak links in Saturn that like that might need addressing?
Yeah, I think you mentioned at the start, Phil, which I completely agree with, is that AI is not perfect. This is a very quick evolving piece of technology that we are trying to keep up with, and our
Yeah,
job is to
yeah,
keep up with that and to help advisors start to implement that. And I think as long as advisors and businesses understands that it's not going to be a perfect output every time, because AI is not a computer, right? It doesn't work in ones and zeros. It's not a kind of binary outcome. It's
yeah,
it's thinking about the way that this data should be outputted, and therefore it could be perceived differently. AI is not 100% accurate, it's not 100% perfect, and Saturn is not either. So advisors, I think, need to ensure that this is not a system that's going to automate the way they do things. It should be seen as a supporting system to enable them to augment the existing processes they do. And therefore, they should also always be in the loop within this system. So we've built Saturn to have human in the loop as a concept, as a key kind of pillar of the way that we build technology. So Paul, for example, sorry, Lee, I think it was that said current weaknesses will always be in control of the process of producing notes, checking, making any edits they want to. And I think that's really important because the advisor is the regulated individual, right? And they are ultimately responsible for the advice that's being delivered, not Saturn and not any AI system. So we need to
Yeah,
make
yeah,
sure the advisor is kind of front and center within that process. So
yeah,
weaknesses, I would say, I think sometimes people get frustrated with speed of development. Everyone wants the next big thing. And I think there's lots of noise out there that advisors want to get on with things. I think that could be perceived as a weakness that, we are being very cautious about how we develop and doing things in the right way. And weaknesses as well, potential, it's not 100% perfect in terms of the output. So,
sure.
we need to make sure we work collaboratively with firms to ensure that they're aware of that. But then we're constantly evolving the systems to improve.
Yeah. Do you publish a list of APIs that you've already got links with?
Yeah, so on our website, there's a number of different things in there. There's the video you mentioned earlier, which is a very open and honest kind of video with some of the people that have been working
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Saturn, talking about the way that AI has been implemented in their business. For us, we really want to focus on some of the stories because I think a lot of businesses are looking for that. They want to understand how other businesses like them have implemented technology and some of the things they've struggled with and some of the things that have gone well. Um, you know, Matt Fowler from Paradigm Norton is part of that video. He was always also speaking at the Next Wealth AI Labs fairly recently. He's talking about some of the frustrations or struggles that the team have had with AI implementation. So, I think being very honest and open about that, I think is really important.
Mhm.
Also on the website, there's a description of the services we currently offer. There's a lot of discussion about the systems we're currently integrated with. There's also a fun part called Life on Saturn, which is our employees talking about working within the business. There's some really interesting insights within there. So yeah, definitely check that out. But we'd love to kind of speak to anyone that wants to explore working with Saturn, obviously in kind of a more personalized way,
Yeah,
via
yeah.
a call or a coffee or a meeting or something like that.
Sounds great. So, starting to wrap up, here's a tough one for you. Where do you see the state of play when it comes to AI and financial planning in now? Let's be generous, 2 to 3 years time.
I think AI will become very commoditized. I think the cost to producing AI systems is becoming cheaper and cheaper, and I think that's why you're seeing more and more providers pop up. So, the differentiator between AI providers is not really going to be in the AI itself. It's going to be in the way that we actually deploy AI consciously.
Mhm.
So ensuring that you're working with providers that are talking like that and understands that actually, our pitch is not in the AI systems we're developing, it's in the operational efficiency that you want to bring within businesses. Ultimately, my view is that AI will work for each individual advisor, a paraplanner, administrator within the business, and we will each have our own piece of AI that will help us to do our day-to-day activities. An advisor will have their own AI agent, which will help them do meeting preparation, help them do the meeting, follow up from the meeting,
Yeah,
and then pass that detail over to the paraplanner that works within their team that has their own AI agent that will help them extract data from documents and execute on the advice that's being delivered. And it would enable us as human beings to work far closer together and spend less time kind of siloed, kind of doing the manual work that we have to do right now. So I think where AI is going to have an impact in the next 2 to 3 years is actually kind of liberating us from a lot of the manual mundane stuff that we have to
yeah,
do
yeah,
and
yeah,
actually improve the quality of relationships that we have both within our business, but also outside of our business. And I'm really excited about the way that AI can help humans connect on a more deeper level and spend more time together. You could almost start to think of this as a kind of reversion back to pre-RDR ways where it's very relationship based and we're out on the road and we're down the pub speaking to clients and all that
Oh, we
sort
don't
of
want any
stuff.
of
I think that
that.
stuff's important. It's all about human connections,
Yeah,
but actually we need to make sure that we do that in the right way. And
yeah,
AI can help us adhere to the same standard of advice that we have right now, but ensure we're focused on the human connectivity as well. And I think that in
yeah.
the next 2 to 3 years is going to be the big focus.
That's interesting. That comes over quite well in your video. In that, I mean, I get it. It's a big leap for a lot of advice firms in terms of technology. We've kind of got used to the technology. We like to have a moan about the technology we use. And here's another technology that is arguably promising the earth. I get it that it's a big deal, but one thing that came over in your videos was it was quite liberating once that step had been taken.
Yeah. Once that step's been taken, and I also think really importantly, once the team are bought into it, I think that's a really key part of
Yeah,
this. I
yeah,
think, ensuring businesses have this kind of culture of change where everyone within the team is bought into the fact that, AI is this inevitable wave that's coming into the industry, but how can we start to harness this technology to be impactful across the business? And this isn't going to threaten individual people's jobs. It can be seen as a way to really drive excitement within the team. So I do think that that team buy-in and that culture of change, as I mentioned, is a really important part of this process.
Mm. So Lee's asked the price question. Um, what's it cost?
Yeah, so we charge based on different modules. So advisors can kind of pick and choose which modules they want to start with, all kind of full hog, big bang approach, everything, all kind of phase out, as I mentioned. Our meeting note transcription tool is charged at £100 plus VAT per advisor per month. Letter generation is normally somewhere around the £250 plus VAT per advisor per month mark, but most of the time we charge letter generation at a firm level so we can understand the volume of reports you're doing, the integrations you need, what type of reports you're doing, who needs to be involved in that project. So most of our pricing is done on a more bespoke level, but I just wanted to give you some numbers so you've got some takeaways from that.
Yeah, yeah. So where can people find out more, Tom?
So our website is www.saturnos.com. In there is a link to book discovery calls with us. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. My email is tom@heysaturn.com. I'm sure Phil will circulate kind of
Yep.
information after this to the community. Yeah, we'd love to have a chat. There's 6, 7, 8 of us working within the partnerships team. So lots of scope for proper detailed conversations and spending time with firms we work with.
Yeah. Tom, absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. Really interesting. Great to get your sense of where this is all going. To me, the thing that really came out of this, the concept of a client experience and putting that first, which I really like, and how AI can facilitate that. Absolutely great. Anything exciting coming up that you're desperate to tell us about?
I think the two big pieces of news from us has been the ATIP acquisition and then Gary Abella from Real OA joining us,
Yeah.
which will be announced today. So there's a bit of a scoop for everyone here. But we are thinking very consciously about how we build the most effective team to enable us to build the best products for people. So yeah, very exciting kind of journey there, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm quite inclined to do this again in, say, 10 months' time, just to see how things have evolved, changed, and so on and so forth. We'll talk about that another time. So thank you to
I'd maybe short on that time frame. I think 10 months is a long time in our world. So maybe 3 or 6. There'll be a lot of updates to come.
Fabulous, fabulous. Thank you so much, Tom. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for coming along. And if you're watching the video, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. And we'll see everybody on the next one. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Phil.
Tom.